Tem algumas aqui que já chegaram, todas estão anônimas. Tem duas aqui para o professor Hartmann. Aceleramos a ponto de 1% da população mundial concentrar quase 50% da riqueza produzida mundialmente. Trata-se de um modelo perverso na perspectiva de um projeto humano. Inovar aí, então a pergunta, inovar não seria, portanto, uma forma de repensar o projeto humano? Que valores ou narrativas culturais poderiam nos ajudar a construir um novo pacto civilizatório? Vou emendar com uma outra aqui de uma pessoa que já se diz pessimista e pergunta: é possível encontrar uma estabilidade dinâmica em um sistema capitalista?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. I actually do believe that we have two problems in the current system. One really, at least two problems. One, of course, is the distribution, right? There's an incredibly uneven distribution of wealth on the one hand, and by the way, also of time, right? I mean, there is a scarcity of time mostly by those who have a lot of money, and an abundance of time by those who don't have it at all. So there is a huge inequality, and I would agree that the current capitalist system is still strongly connected to forms of exploitation, right, and injustice. So we certainly have to find a different way. But when you look at, I mean, when you actually take it back to the analysis of Marx, right, then you can see that he has two accounts of capitalism. One is inequality and exploitation. The other is what he calls alienation, a wrong way of being in the world, I would really say, with the early Marx. And the interesting question is, how do we overcome the problems we are having altogether? So there are some who think we first have to change the distributional system, right, the injustice or the exploitation, and then we can deal about alienation. And I think it's the other way around, actually. I mean, because it's not true that those who, I mean, even the very rich, in my account, they are not living a good life, right? It's a desperate life. It's a very sad life, really. I mean, they are destroying the ecological sphere. They are exploiting millions of people. But even though there is enough richness and resources in the world, it's a bit like what you just talked about. The logic of accumulation is never enough. So we are jointly, the whole system is going in a very mad direction. And I think we have to see the wrongness of this, the alienating capacity which makes life miserable for the rich and for the poor. And to go out of the system altogether, then we will find ways and means to distribute wealth and resources and also temporality at a much, at a fairer level. Because I mean, I think both problems are really bad, but the current narrative somehow, I believe, provides motives to both sides. I mean, it provides motives to those who are poor, that they want to be as rich as the rich, and it gives motives to the rich that they want to stay where they are, right? Stay in the race and become maybe even richer like some others. So the motivational energy, the libido, is in the game of accumulation. And I think we somehow have to pull the plug and rethink our whole way of being in the world. And then I believe we will overcome this vast imbalance and injustice which there is in the world. But yes, it would involve a change away from the current logic of capitalist accumulation. I'm pretty convinced about this, right? I think there might be, markets are a very efficient tool in allocating and somehow negotiating between needs and supply. But it somehow needs to be re-embedded in a cultural and political system. So the runaway capitalism which we have right now, the financially driven capitalism, certainly is not going to work in the long run. Okay, so I think I'll leave it at that.
Uma pergunta aqui para o professor Norval, também está sem o nome da pessoa. Para o filósofo Wittgenstein, a linguagem é o próprio pensamento. Se nesse presente em que vivemos hoje tudo se transformou em imagens que abundam nosso cotidiano num ritmo cada vez mais veloz, presente este no qual podemos viver em outra dimensão, a virtual, na qual a linguagem predominante é constituída por imagens. Poderíamos assim projetar o futuro pós-contemporâneo como um pensamento apenas imagético? E se sim, o que será de nossa capacidade de abstração e criação teórica, que foi possível graças ao exercício constante e à sofisticação obtida pela escrita?
Obrigado pela pergunta, é uma pergunta complexa, muito interessante e não simples de ser respondida em poucos minutos. Nós temos a escrita surgiu ontem. Antes disso, não é? 40 mil anos atrás, talvez 60 mil anos atrás, 100 mil anos atrás, nós deixávamos marquinhas nas árvores, ou no chão, ou pedras, e já era um tipo de escrita. Então, a rigor, tecnicamente, não deveríamos separar escrita de imagem. Aliás, escrita, a palavra, vem de scribere, do latim, que vem de sker, do indo-europeu. Sker, em indo-europeu, significava cortar. Daí, da palavra sker, veio a palavra carne. E vem discriminar também. Então, toda escrita é um corte. Na terra, na árvore, na pedra. E todo corte é uma imagem. Não é? Então, é um assunto absolutamente maravilhoso. Não é? E o surgimento da escrita como sistema, ele nasceu da contabilidade. Por isso que a gente fala escriturar hoje. Não é? Então, nasceu no momento em que a pessoa tinha mais do que 2 cordeiros, ou mais do que 2 cabras, e que tinha que emprestava uma cabra para o outro e tinha que deixar registrado, porque se o outro morresse, a família ia ter que pagar. Então ele mostrava lá a chapinha, a escritura. Não é? Então temos esse problema. E quando nós falamos de imagem, nós estamos falando de um conceito que abrange justamente todo esse sistema, que é um sistema contábil, porque tem a ver com o pensamento da acumulação, não é? E que tem a ver também com o sistema... É claro que o nosso pensamento é feito disso. O nosso pensamento foi formulado, foi modificado, foi do pensamento nômade para o pensamento sedentário, ele passou a operar, vamos dizer, economicamente, não é? Quantitativamente. Não é? O que eu fiz agora, o que eu tenho que fazer ainda. Não é? Tem um amigo canadense, professor, que se aposentou e falava a respeito do tempo. Não é? Ele dizia o seguinte, eu perguntei, e agora, como é que está? Como é que está a vida de aposentado? Não é uma coisa que no Brasil não teremos essa chance de experimentar. Não é? Ele falou assim, uma maravilha. Quando eu levanto de manhã, eu não tenho nada para fazer. E quando eu vou me deitar à noite, eu não fiz nem metade. Então, vejam que a ideia de Wittgenstein que pensamento é linguagem é uma outra coisa do que pensamento é escrita. Tá? Ou uma outra coisa de que pensamento é imagem exógena. Se o nosso pensamento se contaminar com as imagens permanentes, eternas, eu ia usar um palavrão, mas nos ferramos. Mas é com F, de qualquer maneira. Não é? Nos ferramos. Não é? O pensamento tem que ser dinâmico, como as imagens endógenas são dinâmicas. Espero ter podido responder a pergunta.
Espero que sim. Nós recebemos aqui uma pergunta em alemão que eu, infelizmente, ainda não consigo traduzir para você. Então, acho que o professor Rosa, se puder colocar a pergunta e respondê-la, por favor. É doutor por Berlim. Sim, sim.
Que bom que ele não me pediu, né?
Yeah, I mean, someone asked she's a teacher, and she also has the impression or the awareness that she's permanently running for time, right? So being short on time really is the problem we all face. So the question is, what can she do as an individual about it, and what can she do as a teacher? Because of course this is important when you work with young people and with kids. So how could we help them, or what should we tell them? So, I mean, this is a very interesting question. I mean, look, this is how I started to think about time, because I realized that I felt, I remember when I started about it, I thought, well, there's something wrong with me. I'm just bad in time management, right? I'm not doing well with time because I'm permanently running out on time and I'm short on time. So I realized that everyone else said the same thing, right? People said, oh, I'm okay right now, but I'm just not good at dealing with time. I can't say no enough, or so, something like this. And then I realized, well, if everyone has this impression, then it's probably not us who are doing the wrong thing. It's a systematic, a structural feature. And this is how I came up with the logic of acceleration. So my first answer is, if it's a structural and institutional problem, we cannot solve it individually, right? You cannot just change something in your life or read a book on self-help with time and then everything is solved. So I was really pessimistic in my first book on social acceleration, because I said, well, there's nothing we can do. I mean, you can jump out of, it's like we are running in a huge hamster wheel, right? And since everyone else is also running, this thing is getting faster and faster. So if you decide to slow down, you will be just kind of trampled under by all the others, right? So you can jump out of the wheel, but then you never know when and how you could ever come back. So I was very pessimistic then. Now I think, I mean, on the one hand, we have some possibilities to cope with temporality. For example, it helps. There are two things which I think that do help. One thing is that trying to save time doesn't really help, because this is what we are doing for 250 years. We are always saving time. I now have a faster car and a faster smartphone and a faster connection and so on. And in fact, it makes the problem worse, right? So it's actually the best thing to do is waste time. And if you waste time for a day or so, you will feel somehow your temporality changes. And another small trick is that you should reserve certain moments in time, slots in your schedule. Saturday afternoon, I put in my schedule nothing. From 2 to 4, I do nothing. And if someone asks, oh, can we meet on Saturday at 2? I say, no, I have something important to do at that time. It's nothing, right? So we have to create these small pockets or islands. It won't help with the big problem, but it changes the way our perception of time. And I think this is what we should teach kids too. I mean, basically, I think there are two things for the question with teachers. I mean, one is we have to give them the experience that sometimes it is important to invest time in a long-term perspective. I find this culturally very important, because there are some things where a kid immediately feels why it's interesting. So play a computer game, you don't have to invest much time, and then you realize why it's great, it gives you something. But if you want to learn a language or play the violin or the guitar, as we heard this morning, you have to invest a year or two before you get something out of it, right? And I think it's very important, right? This is one of the cultural tricks, how we create a kind of cultural capital, that we keep the capacity to teach our kids that long-term investment is important in temporality. But then I also think that we should actually create education processes as processes of resonance, where you really listen to the kid and give them the experience that his or her voice are important to you. So the process of listening and answering is totally important for the process of education. And there's a high danger that in education we want to have quick results, measurable results. So that's kind of creating or turning schools into spheres of alienation. So it's very important to keep the process of resonance, of listening and answering open in the process of schooling, and then maybe this is one way of how we turn the future into a great future for all of us.
Bom, infelizmente a gente está sem tempo para continuar. Tinha mais uma série de perguntas aqui sobre esse futuro fragmentado, a questão da internet, questões também econômicas, enfim, que eu acho que a gente poderia continuar durante muito tempo aqui falando sobre esses assuntos. Essas perguntas vão ser faladas também para os professores. Então, queria agradecer ao professor Hartmann, ao professor Norval, e terminamos então essa primeira mesa. Muito obrigado.